Okay. 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 Here I'm going to give you my point of view on plant propagation. And I've lost. Oh, I forgot it doesn't do that. I wanted to use my cursor so I could point to things, but when I'm doing a play, the video, I'm playing the PowerPoint, it doesn't work. So I can't point to anything. Okay. Well, darn. Okay, so propagation, as we expect, is making plants. I'm not going to do seed, but a lot of the times, plants from seeds are a form of plant propagation. But I'm going to do the asexual forms, or the cloning, where we get an exact copy of the plants that we start with. For our plant propagation here. Because this, if you include seeds, that's a whole nother subject, would take hours to go through seeds. So there are three main ways that we can make more plants, and that is layering, cuttings, or divisions. And I'm going to talk about each of those. Another way that it's done a lot is by tissue culture, but of course we can't do that at our homes, and that's how all of the companies do it, and that's why we can buy these plants so much cheaper than we used to 20 years ago, because they're growing the tissue culture and growing thousands at a time, and it really cuts the cost down. So we're going to make more plants. There are lots of reasons why you might want to make more plants. We want to have more in our own yards, have a bigger clump of something, or we might want something from the front yard to put in the backyard. We might want to give them to our friends. That's probably the main way we use plant propagation, is by potting things up and giving them to our friends. Sometimes we have garden club or master gardener plant sales, and we're going to propagate in order to sell the plants as a fundraiser for our organizations. And I guess that's pretty much the only. Well, and then also I'm going to show you how to propagate some things to save them during the winter, where they would freeze outside, but we're going to keep them inside, but in a smaller way. So here we go. First of all, before I talk about any of those three, though, there's a little bit of legal part of this. There are patents on plants. So plant patents are issued to newly invented by also seeds, but also the asexually reproduced plants, the way we're going to talk about today. And so a patented plant cannot be propagated to sell. The patent lasts for 20 years. You can propagate anything you like for your own use. So I can make cuttings and make lots and lots of something that's a patented named plant and give them to my friends. I can get around this by not having it named. Like if I have a daylily, a purple daylily that had a patented name, but I don't know what that name is. It's just a purple daylily. That's kind of in the gray area of, is that really still that patented plant? You're not selling it for profit. Like if you donate it to an organization to sell at their plant sales, you're not growing it for profit, so you're really not competing with the companies. The thing is you don't want to be taking away business from somebody who's trying to make their living with these plants. And so if it's not named and it's donated to something and it's not profit, you can sort of get around the patents. And that's what we usually do, and we just don't ask. But I never take a plant to a plant sale that is probably still under a patent. I never take it with its name on it, as a cultivated name. And then only for nonprofit also. So you can't make money off of these, is what I'm saying, because somebody else already is. And things that are grown from tubers cannot be patented. So that would include dahlias and things like irises and things like that. They don't have patents. And then also a native uncultivated plant, of course, wouldn't have a patent because it's their, public domain is what it is. Okay, so that's one thing to know before we start making the more plants, is that you have to be careful what you do with them. And an example of that, here's an example from a catalog of an echinacea called Mamma Mia, and it talks about it, and it has its patent number. Now here's where I would have pointed to it, but at the bottom it'll say PP 23,172. That's plant patent number. And also if it says PPAF, then it's applied for. And it'll say it on the name tag. Do I have a tag here? I did have a tag here. Yeah. Okay, so I have a name tag here, and it has its patent number. And this is for Crocosmia Emily McKenzie. Now this one's been around about 20 years. This one's probably about over. I'll have to look with my glasses on and see what that says later. Because I do have some of that to divide. Okay, so the first way of making more plants is layering. And layering is when a stem or a branch is still attached to the mother plant, and you get it to root without cutting it off the plant by having the stem go down into the ground, or you can set a pot of potting soil there, have your stem go down into your pot, and then you weight it down and keep it there, and then over time it'll grow roots at a node. Do we need to review what nodes are? I have so I don't know how this is going to show up. I have a coleus I'm going to do a cutting of later, and it's got nodes. Nodes are these little joints where the leaves come out. Those are nodes, and that's where there's buds, and those buds are where you can grow either roots or more leaves or even another stem. And that's the only part of a plant that can grow is at these nodes. So you have to make sure if you're going to layer that you have at least one node into your ground. If you just put regular stem there, nothing's going to happen. Okay? So that's a review of basic botany there. And let's see. Okay, and when the roots form, which you don't usually put out, but when they do, you can cut the branch off and then put it in a pot and you have another plant. And some plants do this very easily. Here's a picture of how it would work. Oh, I can't move myself. Okay. I wish I had my cursor. So you just here they're using a piece of wire to hold, or showing in the picture, a piece of wire to hold your stem down into the ground. Mostly I've used rocks or a paver. You know, you can take a paver and sit on it, something heavy, because you want it to not move for quite a while. Now you can do layering by making a mound over a central stem, and this plant would make 3 more plants, and you possibly or probably would lose your original plant, but here you would mound up some potting soil or dirt over it and leave it for a while, and then it'll form new roots on each of these stems, and you get 3 plants out of that one. So plants that do this are things like heather and lavenders. This works really well. Spanish lavender does this all by itself all the time. Anytime a branch touches the ground, you end up with roots rooting and another plant. So that's layering. Layering works on some plants, not on everything. But you know, if you have something with a long branch going and hanging down on the ground or going down to the ground, you can layer it. You can do this with rose bushes too if you wanted. Anything that's down on the ground. A really good example is not a good plant, but is blackberries. You know how when you get a blackberry vine, and you'll get a blackberry vine that goes down, and then you pull it up later, and here you have all these little blackberries started all along that stem. That's an example of layering. Okay, so now the main way we do propagation is cuttings. And so cuttings can be made from all the different parts of the plant. You can have cuttings from the roots, you can have leaf cuttings, and you can have stem cuttings. The root cuttings we don't do very often, but this is what you would do in the winter time. So a root cutting is just like it says. You take a section of a long root, and again, you're looking for the nodes, and make sure there's some nodes in there, and you just bury it below the surface of your pot or tray, and it will, you know, make more roots, and it'll send a shoot up at that node. So the roots are already there, and this time you're looking for the shoots rather than the roots. Kind of the other end of the plant, isn't it? The same theory here. So you can take root cuttings this time of year, November through February, when the plant is dormant, because that's when the maximum amount of food is stored in the roots. And in the spring, when the temperature warms up, it's going to start growing. It's going to start growing up on a new stem. Okay, this works for quite a few plants. An example that you probably, again, things that we don't want that do this are cherry trees and plum nursery. I have roots plants springing up all over my lawn from the cherry tree next door, and that's what it's doing. It's doing propagation from roots. If you're going to do this, you would take a cutting the size of a pencil, and so you want it pretty big, a big root, not a little root. And you want it 3 to 6 inches long. You're going to have nodes in it. So I've got a piece of bamboo here, but it has a node right there. To make sure you've got a node in there or it's not going to grow. Okay, and then you just put it in the ground. You can do, now they're suggesting a straight cut at one end and diagonal at the other, but they can even both be straight. That's not very important. You would put it down in the tray flat because it's a root, and it's going to grow at that node. It's going to grow a stem going up. Now they're saying, okay, cover with clear plastic, and that is in order to keep it from drying out. So we always cover everything with plastic. Make a little mini greenhouse, just so you don't have to water it and it's not going to dry out. And I'll get to that on the stem cuttings. Trees and shrubs, you can take big chunks of roots and tie them in bundles and put them in the ground outside and let them just naturally root. They're going to do it. A lot of trees will do that. Here's a good example. Okay, red twig dogwoods, mock oranges. Those are things we have a lot of in our yards. For smaller plants, they say an epimediums can do that. Epimediums I usually propagate by division because they're easy to do, but they do have a huge root system. And acanthus bear's breeches have huge roots also. Okay, leaf cuttings. I've done leaf cuttings. Maybe a lot of you have done some of these. You do these with African violets. If anybody's tried to propagate African violets or begonias, they're done with leaf cuttings. And so what you do is you just take pieces of the leaf and stick it into soil or medium and keep it wet, and a whole new plant will grow at the base of that leaf. And eventually you throw away or cut off the leaf that you started with. You're going to have a whole new plant next to it. And here's a good example of that. A lot of our house plants and tropical plants are propagated this way. Especially, like I said, begonias and African violets. And it's fun to do. You can, it's easy to, you just take a leaf and stick it in the ground and stick it in some potting soil in a little pot and put a plastic cover over it to keep it moist. And okay, you guys can't see this. My cat's about to jump on me. Okay, there. I always have a helper here. He loves Zoom meetings. So leaf cuttings are really good for sedums also, and all kinds of succulents, especially the tropical ones. Yeah, and again, they have what it is they have a lot of buds. Look at how
Don't
close.
ask your neighbors, your friends, what they think of this. You go see if you can connect with the purest source.
Okay, I don't know what that was all about. Was that to us?
That was somebody that should have been muted and wasn't, but they are now.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure what that was. Okay, let's go to stem cuttings. Here's what we really are here to talk about. Okay, so on stem cuttings, it's just like you say, instead of the root or a piece of leaf, we're going to use a whole stem, and you can see the buds on these stems in this picture. And almost every kind of plant that has branches and stems can be propagated this way. Now some plants have like rosettes. They come from a center crown and go out in a circle. Those you don't do stem cuttings on those because they don't have stems. Each leaf comes from the crown. But any plant that doesn't come from a crown, you can do leaf cuttings. You can do them at different times of year. If you do them, this has got it. If you grow them in the spring, they're softwood cuttings. And they're very soft. In fact, not only spring, but today I'm going to do wood cuttings of these coleus and and I have some geranium that I want to overwinter. That's a softwood. Semi-ripe cuttings I'm going to do. That's when they're still soft, but they're starting to get more woody. And here's an example of a fuchsia. So you know how the stems on the fuchsia at this time of year they start getting more woody. So this is what you do later on in the summer or in the fall. And then hardwood cuttings are when you just have the woody stem, and that would be for shrubs, bigger shrubs, and conifers and things like that that you would do in the fall and winter when all the wood is hard. So there's different times of year. There's all kinds of charts, and it's easy to look up what time of year to do a certain plant. So if you wanted to do hydrangeas, you could look up very easily when to do cuttings of hydrangeas. Or I don't have the reference for where, I have lots of charts and I don't know where they've all come from. They're just single pages that I've printed off. So I don't know where I got them, sorry. But you can easily look it up, and if it'll say softwood, semi-ripe, or hardwood, then that's when you know when to do it and what it should feel like. Here's some examples of things. So it's very easy to propagate: mint and penstemons, salvias. Oh, I do have a salvia I should go do too. And this is really nice to make a lot more of. These are things that you want a lot of in your yard, and they're nice in big clumps. So you could do it in the spring, start with one in the spring, and you could, by the end of June, 1st of July, you might have 10 or 15 of them, and that would be really great. Okay, so here's what we do. We're going to start with, I'm going to start with this coleus. So the reason that I want to do at this time of year some cuttings is because I have some plants that are not going to overwinter. They're not hardy. And so I have some coleuses, I have this fuchsia, I have that geranium. I'd like to have them again in the spring, but I don't want to keep the whole plant in my garage. I don't have room. And it's better instead to do a cutting. And so I'm going to take some nodes, and where did I put them first? And I'm going to clip them off. Where's my camera? There. I'm going to clip it off, not too close to the node. I want to have, so that if it dies back a little, I'm not too close to the node. Then I'm going to take off these leaves. You can pull them off on some plants. Others, it's better to cut them off. Oh, see, I broke that because I didn't cut it. I pulled it. See, that's the bad thing. But I have another one. And so I'll start again. I'm going to cut it off here. And this time I'm going to be better. I'm going to cut these off instead so I don't break that stem. I don't want to break my stem. When you're going to make a cutting, you only want 2 leaves at the most left. Cut everything else off, and make sure there's no flowers on it, because if it has flowers on it, the plant is going to try to finish making seeds and reproduce, and it's not going to grow roots. It's just all going to go into the seeds. Okay, so there I have 2 leaves at the top. If you have a plant with really big leaves, it's okay to cut the leaf, cut the tip off of the leaf. That's okay, because it won't kill the leaf, and the way that the veins work in a leaf, it won't hurt. This lower part will still get plenty of water, and it won't hurt the plant. And if you have too big of a leaf, then the plant with no roots can't keep any water going up there because it doesn't have roots yet. So you don't want it to lose too much water. Okay, so there I've got my plant. I'm going to turn the computer over here to the table. Oh yes, this is going to work good. Okay, so here's my tray. Now, you can put them just in a pot like this. If you want to do just a few, I have a tray, and this tray is a plastic bin I bought, and it's just a plain old plastic bin from Fred Meyer's or somewhere. And I drilled holes in the bottom, and that way it's plastic, it holds water pretty well, doesn't dry out. I didn't have to build anything out of wood. It was really cheap, and it lasts forever. Okay, so I'm going to use rooting hormone. There's a few kinds of plants you don't have to use rooting hormone because they have their own natural chemical. It's a hormone in it, like willows and things like that have it naturally. But I'm going to just use it because I've got it. This one is Root Tone brand. There's lots of different brands, and what I like about this one is it includes fungicide. So I won't get any root rot fungus. So this is really great. I get 2 things in one. Okay, but now don't dip it into this container because you're going to get dirt, you're going to get it contaminated. You pour it into another smaller container and then dip it into that. And then I've got some on there. I probably have more than I need, but I'm going to throw it away when I'm finished anyway because I don't want to put it back in the bottle contaminated. Okay, on a hard, If I had a hard cutting, I could just stick it right in here, but this is really soft. So I'm going to use this bamboo stick. I'm going to make a hole. You can use a pencil. I used to use pencils, and finally I found a good stick. And then I'm going to put it in that hole. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm making a hole, and then I'm putting it in there as far down as I can, and then I'm going to bury it. And that's all there is to that, and that'll grow probably pretty well all winter. And I'll fill this whole tray up with plants that wouldn't last through the winter, and next spring I'm going to have everything already made, and I won't have to buy them. This fuchsia, I'm going to do the same thing. This does have flowers on it, so I have to take those flowers off. It's better to use a tip that does not have any flowers to start with. That's the best, but this is the only one I have left that didn't die back already. And I've already lost my clippers. Oh, there they are. Okay, so I'm going to clip off the leaves, making a mess. I'm just leaving 2 leaves, and I have 1, 2, 3, I have 4 nodes because they're closer together. That's great. If you have something like a hebe that has nodes really close together, it's okay to have 10 nodes under. That's not a problem at all. Okay, and I'm going to dip it in my hormone, and I'm going to make a hole, and I stick it in the ground. And that's all there is to it. Pretty easy, isn't it? Anybody have any questions on that? That's like the basic.
Yeah, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Then do you have to put those in a grow light, or can they just be in the dark?
For the winter, if I'm doing this in the spring and summer, I just have them in the shade outside. They have to stay in the shade, not too much light. In the winter, if I don't have a window, I have a really nice window in my garage. So, and if it's cool, they won't grow real fast. I don't want them to grow fast because I don't want them to be ready too early. If I had a grow light and in the house where it was 65, 70 degrees, they would be up and sprouted and wanting to get planted outside by the 1st of March. And I don't want them that early. I just want to overwinter them and keep them alive. So I'm going to have them cooler than that so that they grow slower. And a light would be nice, but they don't need as much as you think. Right? So a window or low amount of light. It doesn't need a lot of light. In fact, yeah, you could just leave a regular lamp. It doesn't have to be a fancy grow light. Now the last thing, I would water it before I put, and I would put a plastic cover. So I made this plastic cover out of just clear plastic, and it's got painter's tape holding it together into a little tent. And I put it over here. In here I have little pieces of wood, and I use that as the corners, and that holds the plastic up off my plants. And I made a little tent for it. But after that, that's what I did first, and then I found this other bin. So I had this other empty bin, a clear plastic bin, and instead I decided, well, I'll just try doing that, and I can set that whole bin over the top, and it makes a really nice top, and the plants could grow 6 inches, 8 inches this way. And then I just happened to have that, so it didn't cost me anything. And otherwise, you could just make something out of your plastic. Or if you're doing it, here's a plastic grocery bag. If you're doing some in a pot, here's a 6-inch pot, I can just I would put something to hold it up. I'm going to put this stick in the middle. I don't know if you're going to see what I'm doing. I'm putting a stick in the middle, and then I'm going to put this over like a tent. And then I have a little mini greenhouse, and that was just a grocery bag. I didn't have to buy anything. This one happens to have a hole in the top, but you want it to get a little bit of air. It doesn't need to be airtight. But you're making a little miniature greenhouse. Of course, if you have a greenhouse that you heat air, in the winter, or that stays moist, then you can just do all of this in your greenhouse. You don't need any cover over it. Okay?
Gail, there's several questions in the chat. Do you want to address them now or at the end?
Are they? Let's take a look. Yeah, where's my chat?
Okay, so let me read through them. For the first one,
Okay.
for tip layering, my friend told me that scoring the stem and removing the leaves that will be buried could be useful. Have you found that to be true?
Right. Take the leaves off. Yes. The scoring is to encourage hormones. There's a plant hormone that collects where you cut it, and I was trying to think. Now, do you cut it after your node or in front of your node? And I think you want to cut it after your node. So if you're down, you want the node to go down, and then after it comes up, then you would cut it just a little, and what that does is just collects the growth hormone in that spot. It'll do it fine without it. They do it all the time just on their own. I have a smoke tree that every spring I go and dig up a whole bunch of layerings that I didn't do. It just did it by itself. um but yes, that, especially if it's a really hard thick, you want to do that. Yes.
Okay.
And you do it on the underside, on the dirt side.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what it's doing, is collecting the hormone.
Hydrangeas, do you need to use root hormone?
You don't have to, but they like to stay really wet, of course, because they're hydrangeas. I use rooting hormone, and I always get close to 100%, rooting by using the rooting hormone. So I think it's, if you don't have any, then go ahead and do it without. But if you have it, I paid $5 for this can, this little thing of it, maybe 10 years ago, and I still have it. They give you a lot. I mean, that's a lot of rooting. So, that's going to last another 10 more years. So
Okay.
it's worth it to do it.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Next question. Can you say again what potting medium you are using?
Oh, thank you. I forgot to say. Okay, you can use regular the seed starting potting soil, not the big potting soil, but the seed starting, because it doesn't have any of that wood in it. It doesn't have any pieces of bark in it. It's much smaller. Or you can use perlite. Or what I use is half and half. I use half perlite, half seed starting mix. And it's the seed starting mix holds water better, but you don't want too much water. And the perlite is really great for the roots to grow among it. It's got a lot of air spaces in it, so the roots like it, but it doesn't hold on to any water. And so this gives me a little bit of each. Yeah.
Okay. Can you use a midsection of a stem instead of the end tip?
You can. So, right, and like the fuchsia here, that I still have more nodes. As long as you have like 3 nodes, make sure you have 1 node underground and 1 node above, and it could be anywhere. So I could make more out of this fuchsia stem that I have here. And if you really want to make a lot, they don't grow as fast, and they don't look as nice once they've grown. What's going to happen is they're not going to have the terminal bud, so they don't have a top. They're going to grow 2 side shoots, and you're going to have a plant that comes up and grows out into 2 and then up. So that's why I like the tips better, because it makes a nicer looking plant. But the middle ones work fine. You just get 2 stems instead of 1.
Okay, thank you. How far apart are you planting in your tray?
You don't want the leaves to touch each other, because if they touch each other, you have a chance of fungus growing. So I put them as close as I can, but where the leaves can't possibly touch each other. Even if the leaves droop or perk up, where the leaves won't touch. So in the case of the ones I just did, they're about 3 inches apart. And it's a visual thing. Just put them so that the leaves, there's a space between the leaves, like, a 1/2 inch space between the leaves.
Okay. How cold does your garage get?
These are all things I should have said. I'm asking. There's a lot of little details, I guess, aren't there? It's too bad we aren't in person and we could do it.
So the next question was, how cold does your garage get?
It's nice to keep it around 50 degrees. I don't have a basement, but people that have basements except that it's dark, the basements are always like 50 to 55 degrees. That's a really good way to do it. But if your garage gets down to 30, that's not so good. Move them close to the back door, or sometimes I move things into the house. You know how we get a week or 2 of that 30-degree weather, and I'll move everything into the house for those 2 weeks, and then put it back out when it's warmer. That's for the ones that you're overwintering for the winter. So in the spring, of course, the best time to, I really like to do cuttings in May and do all kinds of things in May, and then you don't have to worry about all that. But it's really nice to overwinter your, special plants.
Okay, and the last question I had out of the chat box was, how often do you water your cuttings?
You can't, depending on what kind of top you have on it or plastic, I can't say a certain time. What you have to do is you have to go stick your finger in it. And if it's, it's moist, you're good. If it's dry, you better water it. You have to keep it, the phrase uniformly moist but not wet. Remember when they used to always say that about everything? Like you would on a house plant. You have to keep it moist because this plant doesn't have any roots or any way of storing water. So you have to keep it pretty wet, but not, you have to keep it moist but not dripping wet. And so you may need to water it a lot more than a house plant would, or more than your regular plants outside. I check them every day. And one day of hot, dry weather or being too dry in the garage, if you left it for like a week or 2 weeks and it got dry, your plants are dead. Once it's dry, they're dead. You don't get another chance. It's like,
and then the question is, do you have to spray the leaves?
No, you don't have to. I just pour water in the medium and it spreads out nicely. Just water the potting soil perlite mix. Yeah.
Okay. That catches up all the questions. We certainly
Okay, great.
Some at the end, so I'll let you go back to your presentation.
Okay, well, and then here's some pictures of what I've just said. So here's a picture of somebody sticking them. Now the top left corner, they're using perlite. See how it's all white? And you can get perlite at the store in same size bags as what this potting soil was in. And it lasts for years, and also if you want to reuse it for years and years, which I do, it does help to clean it once in a while. And what I've decided is that how chlorine bleach will go into the atmosphere, so you can spray it down with bleach water, mix bleach water in it, in a just really lightly once a year, and then let it evaporate for a week, and your perlite's fine, and your mix is all fine again. So you can reuse the same mix and not worry about fungus, especially fungus. That's what these guys get. They're not in there long enough to get flies or pests, white flies or any kind of pest. And okay, on these other pictures, they're showing they're using baggies to put over the top. I'm using white plastic bags. It doesn't have to be clear. The white still lets plenty of light in, but clear is nice. And once they get a certain size, to tell if they're rooted, so about 4 to 6 weeks should be rooted. And if you want to know if they're rooted, what you do is you see that they're alive and growing at the top. What you can do is lightly, I'm going to pretend here, you lightly tug on it. And if it moves right out, then it doesn't have roots, put it back. You tug lightly and it won't come out, then it's rooted and ready to put in a pot. So that's a good trick to get it, know when it's ready. And then you can put them in smaller pots, 4-inch pots. And hopefully our winter ones, by then it'll be warm enough outside, or we could put them out during the day and back in, inside at night to keep warm. And of course in the summer when you're doing it, it's no problem. Now during the winter, the ones that I started last spring and in June and July, I had some cuttings that are about 6 and 8 inches high now, the plant. Rooted and they have a little plant. Those plants, if I'm not taking, in the winter time, if I just left them in those little pots outside, I've had them die from, freezing. So I'm going to be gone all winter. So what I did is I took each of those and I planted the pot and all down into the ground in my raised bed and mulched it up pretty high so that they're protected during the winter while I'm gone. Because I hate to grow them, I've propagated them and then they die at the last minute during the winter. So you don't want that. They're still pretty delicate. Here's examples. Rosemary, tomatoes. It's really easy to do tomatoes. Okay, hardwood cuttings are deciduous shrubs, lilacs, roses, clematis, trees, any kind of trees, grapes. This is what you would do for grapes. You would use no leaves at all, but you still want some buds. And you put them down in pots or in the ground directly, and make sure you have 2 or 3 of those buds underground. And then during the winter, they'll grow. Okay, I haven't been watching our time. So let's go to the propagating our last way by division. And probably most of you guys have done this. This is when you dig something up and you divide it to give to somebody. So we know what it is. Anything that has a clump, and all of these plants that grow from crowns that I was talking about before that don't have stems, lots of those are really good at dividing by division. Daylilies, grasses, hostas, things like that. You need to divide your plants even if you don't want more of them. You need to do it when their flowers get really small or it dies out in the center, as in this picture. And the plants lose their vigor. As they grow too much and they're too crowded, they quit blooming and they have all kinds of, they just don't grow very well. The leaves are smaller. Everything is smaller. They've just gotten too big. Anything with rosettes. Here's an example. And things with rhizomes like mint, they're growing underground. Those are really easy to divide. Clump forming things, that's what I already said. And also you're going to be dividing things that have bulbs, corms, or tubers, things with tubers, like dahlias. This first picture is the crocosmia, and they are, the best way to propagate those is by dividing. You can't, obviously they don't have any stems, so you can't make cuttings. Okay, so general tips. Well, divide them before it starts looking bad. Well, usually we don't do that. I dig up the whole plant, and I do it at their drip line. So I dig up the whole plant. You want to divide them in cool weather because you're going to get stressed if you do it in the summer. Let's see, let's skip on here. Okay, and they're saying the division should be no more than 25% of the original clump. So when you're dividing them, you should divide them into fairly small chunks. If it's in bloom, it's better not to divide it then. And of course, you're going to keep the best ones. And here's a whole bunch of examples of things to do. Okay, like right here, let's see if this will work. I don't know if you can tell I'm outside on my back patio here with the light on. Here's, because I was going to make a mess. Again, this is more fun to do in person. Okay, so here's a daylily I dug up earlier today. But I want to show you my trick for dividing them, because some of these things are hard to divide. So how do I get this daylily cut into pieces? Well, you can do it with a shovel, and then you break a whole bunch of the roots, right? And it makes a mess. You could do it with a knife. This is a hori knife, and it's a really heavy duty. I used to use kitchen knives, and I finally spent the money and bought a real knife. And you can do it with a knife. But here's the best way, and I learned this at a hospital in Oregon. You take forks. I have 2 forks, okay? I'm just going to stick it in there, right? Oh, I hit the cement. I stuck it too hard. One facing one way and one facing the other, right next to each other, okay? And I'm stepping down on them. And then all you do is you pull them apart from each other and push them together from each other. And look, I just divided it in half. Can you see that okay, guys? I don't know if my camera's pointing. Oh boy, that won't come back out. Come here.
I can see it really well. Thank you,
Okay.
Gail.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to do this other one. So I'm just going to stick it in. Oh, well, I didn't stick it very far, but it's in. I'm going to stick the other one exactly the opposite direction, right touching each other. And then I push them away from each other. And I hear it crunching, and then towards each other. And look at that. I got a nice division. I didn't cut anything. All of these little roots are in good shape, and I could plant that. That's still a little big, but if I wanted to put that in a gallon pot, it's too big. And I would do it again. And you can do it from the side. I was doing that one from the top, but I can do it from the side too. And this is so much better than a shovel. Look at that. It just comes apart. Isn't that great? Yeah, okay, and then I would put each of these in a gallon pot. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them already right there. And that was fast. Look how fast that was. If I wanted to do that to a hosta, I have this hosta. This small one, and it was in a pot. I can do the same thing. I'm going to look down in here because these have really big leaves. I've got some crowns here. I'll just kind of stick my fork between these crowns. I'm going to stick one this way. Okay, go in there. Whoa, that's needed potting up a long time ago. It's really hard. Oh, and I've got daylily all over the place. And the other one there. Okay, I go away. And then towards. Okay, there we go. Doesn't that make it easy? There's one. There's two. And I'll have to do it some more because this one was really thick. I think I'll make that into 3 plants. And I'll put one back in the pot. And the other two, well, I mean one in the ground, and I'll probably give one to somebody.
Hey, Gail, lower your camera so they can see what you did.
Oh, okay. Let's see if we can go. Oh, I wish I could see my picture. So I made, oh, here we go. So there's a little plant, oh, too close. There's a little plant there with roots and leaves. And like the daylilies I had already trimmed because they were so messy. But this is about the size of my hand. And that'll fit in a gallon pot really easy. And this hosta piece, there's a really nice piece. Like that. And then I still have, to break apart here, I'll still have 4 more crowns here. Now when I put them in a pot, I personally like to have more than 1 crown. You can do just 1 crown. That's all you have to have. But if I'm going to give it to somebody or buy a plant, I want it to have more than 1 crown because it'll take it years to get more. You know, it's going to sit there the first year, and then you're only going to have 2, and then eventually you'll have 4 or 5. But I don't want to wait 2 years. So I like to put 3 crowns in each pot. Some of these hostas are too big. I might just have 2 crowns in a big hosta. But something small like the crocosmia, I would have 5 of the corm bulbs in that because they're small. You know, you don't want to buy something that's a big pot with 1 thing sticking out. I'm going to get I don't know. They take forever to form clumps. So you want to start with a clump because these are clumping flowers. Okay, let's see. Oh, and here's the oh, I have a bunch of gardenias that need digging up. Yeah, that's next spring. I'll do them. This is a great time to do dividing, and then the spring is a really great time to do dividing. You don't do it much in the winter or summer. You can do it if you have to, but in the winter you can't find the plant because the leaves die back, and in the summer it's just so hot that you're going to lose a lot of leaves and plants. Okay, spring and fall. This is perfect right now. And here's a nice example. Now, here on the right-hand side, they've washed off the roots. And that's really nice. If I had the hose and had washed off all the dirt ahead of time, it would have been easier for me to divide them. But you know, you don't have to wash them because you're going to put them right back in dirt anyway. Tomorrow morning, I'm putting all these guys back into pots or dirt. So why wash them? But it does look pretty in the picture. I don't know. Right? Okay, so these are all plants that have crowns. They grow in rosettes with a crown. Some things you can't divide. They just don't divide well. They don't have cutting, stems for cuttings. They don't have a good crown, and if you try to break them up, they're going to die. Several of the things are like that, and what you really should do is just look for all around the outer edges for separate new plants that have grown. A good example of that is hellebores. Oh yeah, here we go, hellebores. You can divide them if you need to in the fall, but they always send up lots of little shoots along the side, and they'll have lots of seedlings around the outside, and just those are the better way to propagate some plants. Oh yeah, here's a nice example of seedlings. Oh, the hosta I just did, okay, right? There's lots and lots of plants that you can do dividing. Asters is really common. A lot of these things, now I did things that had these kind of tuberous roots. But if you do things that have fibrous roots like grasses and asters, those are easy to divide. And in that case, they don't pull apart with a crown so much. You can go ahead and use your shovel or your knife and just cut a section out, because they have fibrous roots that grow all different directions in little fibers, and so it doesn't hurt the roots to cut them like it does on the hostas and the daylilies, because they have that food storage root. You know, they have that real thick root. So if you have something with fibrous roots, go ahead and just cut it with, oops, wrong way. Cut it with your knife or with a shovel. On a really big grass, ornamental grass, a fountain grass or something, you might just want to, if the center is died off a little bit, you can just use a shovel and cut out a piece of the donut part of the, you know, and cut it into pieces and divide it that way. And that'll be really good and invigorate the plant. Oh, okay, these are in alphabetical order. There are lots and lots of plants that you can do by division. Here's crocosmias. I have a crocosmia here. I don't know what our time is, but we don't need to divide it. It's pretty easy to tell. When you're doing things that have corms, this would be, so it's like a, you know, it's a type of bulb. It's like a bulb, but it's not quite. It forms the this round thing that's the corm on top of last year's, which is on top of the year before. So there'll be a stack of these things. Only the top one is alive. The others are just food storage. So don't divide, you know, you can throw those away. Those are just food storage. You only keep the top one that's alive on things with corms, and that would be gladiolas, crocosmias. Who else does that? Those are the only two I have. I don't know what else has that. So if there's a stack of bulbs or bulb-like things, just keep the viable one at the top. The rest of them are just food storage. And the same way with irises, and I was going to bring the iris out, but I didn't. An iris will have a stem, a long stem, and then it has a branch, and then it has the little new irises are out on the sides of the branch, and then it'll have sections of this rhizome. Those old sections, they're not alive. They're just food storage. They can't grow. You don't want to pot those up. You can break those off and throw them away. You just keep the end ones. And that's where the growing is. Sometimes people get confused about that. Oh, here's an example of asters, which have the fibrous roots. I have to move because it's going to rain. Oh. Oh, daylilies, I just did them. Oh, here's the iris. Okay, oh, nice. You see the top right picture how there's a lot of the grayish brown part, the rhizome part, and then the greens are all on the ends. The live part is only on the ends. The other part is just food storage, and it will never grow. I hope that makes sense to people. Peonies, fall's the best time, but it's better not to divide them at all. A lot of times peonies will never bloom, or they'll die after you divide them and replant them. It takes them years to get back to a nice sized clump. And if you plant them too deep, they will never bloom. So they're tricky. Rhubarb. Some of these plants you really need to divide every few years. Rhubarb's one of those. And again, fall and early spring are the best times. Strawberries, you have plenty of those. They grow, they'll root themselves, and it's kind of a form of layering. Wherever their stem touches the ground, they'll form another strawberry plant, and you can just cut off the stem and pot that up. Okay, so let's go back. Does anybody else have any more questions? I'm going to put this up under the cover here.